Welcome everyone. We are just waiting one more minute to let the audience come in, and then we'll start. Okay, I think we can start. I don't know, Isabel, if you want to wait a bit more, but I think that we can already start unless you say the contrary.
This is good.
Perfect. Okay, so welcome everyone to another one of our webinars in the Public Transport Lab webinar series. Today, focusing on autonomous vehicles as a part of the public transport system. For those of you that are new to this webinar series, this came to be after our webinar series last year focused on mobility and COVID-19. We wanted to focus not only on mobility, but on public transport, discussing the role and the recovery of public transport in a post-pandemic world. Really trying to find out how can we ensure that public transport continues to help cities meet their sustainable mobility targets. And in the webinar series, we have explored different topics going from inclusiveness, urban design, decarbonization, and this week we have two webinars focused more on the technological development. Today on autonomous vehicles. We have prepared quite a complete agenda for you today. We have 5 speakers with us. First, we are going to start with a presentation on a strategy, going into the French and regional strategy for connected automated driving from CARA, a European cluster for mobility solutions. And then we'll start with some project presentations. First, coming from Ride2Autonomy, a very big project on shuttle demonstrations with 2 speakers coming from MapTM and Pen Mobility. Then we're going to go into another pilot, this time in Sweden, from the PAVE project with Max. And then we're going to have another presentation on strategies, but this time looking into more local metropolitan scope. Just for you to know, the strategies presentations will be a bit longer and the pilots will be a bit shorter, and we will take questions after each presentation, and we actually encourage you to ask some questions. The 2 presentations from Ride2Autonomy will do one after the other, and then we'll take questions together, but I will be informing you as we go along. So just before we start, a few details. As I said, questions are most welcomed and actually encouraged, and you can use the chat for this. We will be monitoring. I have support from my colleagues Susanna and Isabel that would help me. Also, you already got this disclaimer when you were joining. We are having the webinar is being recorded and it will be available afterwards. And then finally, not only the video will be available, but we always prepare a summary report, and this will be available also in the coming weeks. Perhaps not just next week, as this is our POLIS conference and we may be busy with that. So just before starting with the presentations, we wanted to set a bit the scene of why this webinar and how did we form the agenda. So at POLIS, we really work on the topic of autonomous vehicles from the perspective of how can we ensure that autonomous vehicles are deployed, ensuring the maximum benefit and the minimum disbenefit. Right now, we are involved, and there is many research and pilot program and projects. In fact, we are involved in 4 projects that are currently under work, 3 of them presenting today. And with autonomous vehicles, the thing is that they have extremely good marketing. There is a lot of claims that autonomous vehicles will be here almost immediately, and they are going to radically change the transport system. But actually, there is also a lot of uncertainty on when will this actually happen, what are going to be the changes, and what are going to be the impacts. So with this, we are really trying to help cities on how can cities plan for autonomous vehicles, a question that we are touching upon today. Then there is the issue that there are many pilots. There are many cities that are starting pilots or continuing pilots, but in many cases, the pilot stay there. So what happens after the pilot? What can we do? How can we look into the scalability of the pilots? And then finally, there for the introduction of autonomous vehicles, we are going to have to need regulatory changes, not challenges. Well, also they are a challenge, but going from the traffic rules, the infrastructure, the liability. So really how to prepare the ecosystem for autonomous vehicles. And following this question actually is very related to our first speaker for today. So Guillaume, I invite you to come to the floor. Guillaume Travers he comes from CARA. He has been working in as part of the Ministry of Transport in France, contributing to developing the French national strategy for automated and driven development. And now he's working in CARA as a representative of automated logistic industry and promoting the development through public-private mission, taking into account not only the policy, but also the technologic and economic aspects. And he's going to give us now a little bit of an insight into this project and how to build an ecosystem. So Guillaume, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Laura.
Stop sharing, you should be able to share.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Is that okay?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So just as Laura said just before, I am working for a European cluster, CARA, which addresses mobility challenges through 6 industry sectors, such as automotive, industrial vehicles, could be bus, could be trucks, rail transport, river transport, cable transport, and active mobility. These clusters gather around 250 members. Most of them are micro enterprises. We have startups, we have also SMEs, but we also have laboratories, research centers, institutions, and educational facilities. The goal is to make all these people, all this network, working all together in order to make some projects a reality. Not only on automated and connecting mobility, but as I just mentioned before, the whole mobility challenges. What really interests us today is what is happening concerning automated and connecting mobility in Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. So this is the region where CARA is actively working on. You can see on this map that we have a lot of experiment sites. We have a lot of academic actors, but also economic actors. Most of them are really centered in the Lyon region, which is one of the biggest cities in the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region. The way we focus on connected and automated mobility in the region is that we tend to, as I said just before, gather people or organisms from varying sizes, meaning that we could have an SME working with an international laboratory or an international industry, so that they could tackle mobility challenges when it comes to automation or connectivity. Doing this, we make the region being more and more expert on connectivity and automation subjects, not only in France, but also beyond. Doing this, we focus not only on innovation or doing projects, but we keep in mind that we aim at creating and maintaining jobs in the region and also at the national point of view. And the role, I would say, for CARA in this strategy is to not only creating jobs, making projects reality, but also federating its local, its regional ecosystem, making those industry and academics and territories all work together in order to address national challenges, national and European challenges. There is a strong link between what are the local issues and how can we make them be more more present at regulatory bodies. Another way to make this strategy more concrete is to deploy a lot of experiments. We have at least 7 shuttles experiments in the region. We also have one logistic experiment that I will tell you more thing about it after, because initially the transport for passengers was a priority at the national point of view, and we saw with the recent crisis from COVID that automated logistics would have a really important impact in the next few years. Cara, in this role, works with France Véhicules Autonomes, which is a large group of many experts, and Cara ensure the automated goods transportation and logistics aspects. We have also public transport, which is led by RATP, and the automotive aspects is led by the PFA, which gathers the whole mobility actors in France. We also have a really important focus on research and technical organization, and we are, I would say, separated in all these four groups, but we all work together on legal aspects, regulatory aspects, but also a really important one, which is safety validation, infrastructure, traffic laws, liability, testing, training and information, and also ethics and of course acceptability. We all work together in groups that gather both industry and regulatory experts in order to tackle mobility challenges, but especially what would be the main benefits for the citizens when it comes to, of course, automation and connectivity. One of the concrete aspects of what we've done through this public-private cooperation is more than 20 experiments on cars, public transports and logistics, more than 80 authorizations delivered by the government, and also 2 big projects which are SAM and ENA, and these projects tend not to make one experiment on a territory and another one somewhere else. We try to make a really coherent national plan on experiments in order to address common good aspects. I will get a little bit bigger focus, a bigger picture on what Cara is doing on automated logistics and goods transportation. What we saw in the last years is that automation should optimize logistics. It's more a tool than a new service. We think that it should enhance what is already set up today. We saw it because we can see already first solutions already set up that need support. We have a wide development range for today limited means, so that we need to collaborate between public bodies and industry bodies, and we still have the regulatory framework, to be set up. What we plan with the national bodies and the industry is the deployment of goods transport solution, both on closed sites and in town centers or even rural areas between 2022 and 2024. The national strategy that we all worked on aims at producing a regulatory framework for goods transportation by the end of 2022. For just a quick word on what has been done for passengers, we have a regulatory framework today in France for automated transport when it comes to passenger, especially for shuttles. So it's not experiments that I'm talking about, it's really a permanent regime. So this was about passenger. I'll go back to what we call TBLA. It's a French word for Transport de biens et logistique automatisé, which means you've seen it before, automated logistics and goods transportation. We work on several groups. We have one focused on acceptability, employment, and training, another one on use cases, trying to identify where are the needs for the industry and for the citizen, and where the technology can address those challenges. And last but not least, safety validation, because if we don't have safety validation, we cannot have a regulatory framework permitting these vehicles to be driven or to be not driven, actually. Quick word on acceptability, employment, and training. Today, since we do not have solutions in our city, it's really difficult to assess impacts yet, meaning that we should make a lot more of experiments so that we could have a little bit more ideas or insights on what is going to be the future and how do we have to transform the employment regarding automation. We also know that there is a shortage and low attractiveness of driver delivery job today. This is a reality. How come the automation make those jobs more attractive, or probably ensure a service where we do not have people working on this segment? We should work also not only on national or regional level, but also at a European level, especially on cross-borders issues. And one word which is at the bottom of the list here, but which is really at the core of our reflection, is that automation should not create social, generational, and cultural divide. It should transform, but helps the people working on this segment to have a better way of working, or replace them where there's nobody, but should not create a divide. About safety validation, we work with 3 groups of experts. We have at the center of our reflection use cases owner, because if we do not have someone, or if we do not identify a special need regarding automation, there is no interest in keeping on the work. So this is really central. We have OEMs in order to tell us if technology can address those needs. And around all that, we have safety validation. This safety validation should ensure that use cases we have in mind could find a solution, a technology, an OEM, and when when both of those words meets, we should ensure that it shouldn't create incidents or accidents. A little bit more things about the use cases we identified in France. 3 families. We have urban logistics, and I would rather say even last mile delivery with delivery assistance solution. We already have some in France. We have B2B shuttles, we have B2C shuttles, and also a standard intermodal logistics unit, because if we don't have this unit that could go from one vehicle to another, we will be limited in our development. We also have constrained areas such as work zone, where there is a lot, really big things to do and less regulatory constraints. So the development is really, how can I say that? Could be really enhanced in those zones. And we also have long and medium haul, which is really close to what has been done on cars today. So we have all those 3 families. They are not that different. Maybe the work zones one is kind of different because we don't have regulatory issues, but it could really help in the development of the other ones, because since it could be accelerated first, we should feed the common good. I've talked about it before, in order to foster the development of other use cases.
1 minute to wrap up, Guillaume. 1 minute.
Okay, perfect. The use cases we are working on today are assisting Droid for last mile delivery. I've talked about it. We have one experiment in the south of France, which is really working today. We have autonomous Droid for delivery, so it's kind of a follow me system. We have the Sailu. I've talked about it before. It's in order to go from one vehicle to another and to ensure that automation will not create break in time or in maneuvers. We also have maneuvers in automation in urban areas for trucks or little vehicles, and also autonomous shuttle on predefined routes. This last use cases is in between passengers transport and logistic transports. For my last slide, what we tend to do in the next few months is many development in mines, in airports, in ports, and also on European projects that Cara is part of, which is award, where we have these constrained areas, and automation is really fostering because of these collaborative aspects, and where the needs meet the effective technology today. And that will be all for me. I'm sorry, I'll go a little bit after the time.
No worries. You didn't. It was actually just to make sure that you didn't, but you really didn't. So thank you very much, Guillaume, for this great presentation and the work that you are carrying out. We have a couple of questions coming from the audience. So first, it's a question on the social and cultural divide that you mentioned as a key thing that we shouldn't forget. And the question goes, given that automation is aiming at optimizing operation, what could be the threats in creating social or cultural divide? Do you mean that we should include social aspects in the system objectives, or how?
This is a really good question. It could have a really negative impact on job creation or even in organizations. Some people, when we study acceptability today, tend to think that automation will replace workers. The message here has to be really clear. This is absolutely not the goal we are focusing on. It could have economic benefits in a society where, I don't know, some jobs cannot be reached by the population, so that we address automation replacing this shortage. But we need to really study acceptability to see if people are really afraid of automation, and if they are afraid of automation because people would tend to think that it would replace people, we should really, how can I say that, ensure that people really understand what is behind that. So the divide I was speaking of was to make sure that when we foster automation, we do not try to foster unemployment rates, if you see what I mean.
Yes, I think it's clear. I hope that answered your question, Osan. And I really agree, especially when a new technology comes in, that it needs to be, the acceptability that is not only creates that it doesn't create the cultural divide, but it's actually accepted and understood what is the purpose. There is also another interesting question, that it's, in your opinion, which domain do you expect that AVs to be deployed first? Is it freight and urban logistics, or is it public transport? And let me also add, is it public transport in local areas, in urban areas, or is it public transport in more like a regional perspective? So which one, what do you think?
I will cheat. I would say both. Actually, it's not really about is it freight or is it passenger. It's more about the environment. As I said just before, the main focus today is on safety validation, and it is really, really difficult to validate a system where you have a lot of vulnerable users around you. When you have bicycles, when you have pedestrians, when you have cars going at, I don't know, 50 kilometers per hour. But when you are working on a closed site, could be a logistic area, could be an industrial site, could be a mine, just as I said before, for logistics, but you also have for passengers areas, campus, you have malls, for example, where you don't have that much people around you. So you have already some systems today, which are, I don't know, maybe 20 years old in airports where you can transport passengers and it's full autonomous. So the one that will arrive in the next few years, I would say in public areas, in rural areas or urban areas, would be the one where the environment is the most easy to control. So it depends on the territories, which politics will want to have the first system, public transport system. It just have to equip its environment, its infrastructures in order to make sure that those vehicles would be driven without creating other accidents or any accidents. So more about the environment than the use cases, actually.
Okay, I think that's a fair answer without compromising too much. There's also a question that I'm not sure I understand. Maybe Vera, you can post something more clarification. Will the implications with the deployment of autonomous vehicles by years will be increased or remedied at all? I'm not sure that I understand it. So if you can clarify on the chat, that would be great. And then we have also a question on Frederick about the current situation in France for robo-taxis. If there's a law in public, if this is already allowed in this strategy that you mentioned, and if so, since when was it published? Do you have information on this?
Yeah, sure. It was published in 2 times, actually. The first time was an ordinance, and it was published at the end of 2019. And the last one for passengers systems, it was published in April, late April. So you can find it on the official site of the French Ministry for Transport. And if you don't find it, I can put it in the chat box afterwards.
Great. Thank you very much. Yes, Susanna mentions if you could share a link in the chat box, that actually would be great and very helpful. And I think that we are going to go now to the next speaker. Thank you very much, Guillaume, for your great presentation. It would be great if you stay in, and if you see the questions, I think there was another one for you, if you can reply to it in the chat directly. And I would like to invite now to the floor to Jaap Fresbijk. I hope I pronounce well your name. Dutch is not my forte. Jaap is a traffic architect working for connected and automated driving at MAP Traffic Management, and he has over 15 years of experience in international research, innovation, and pilot projects on smart mobility and CCAM. He is right now working in the Ride2Autonomy project that he will introduce to us. So I will let you now the floor. As with Guillaume did, I will give you a 1-2 minute warning if I see that we are approaching the time. Thank you, Jaap. And we can see your screen.
Excellent. Thank you for this introduction, and thank you also for the invitation to present very briefly this Ride2Autonomy project. There's another partner from the consortium in the panel who will be the next presenter and present one of the pilots in more detail. But first, I'd like to give you a short introduction into this project. It's a project funded by DG Connect under a call that was launched last year. And one of the requirements was to gather 10 pilots with autonomous transport and try to bring together as much as possible the lessons learned from these pilots. So that's what we try to do. As a project overview, the project started in April this year and will run for 1.5 years until October next year. It has a budget of 1.3 million euros. So it doesn't fund the pilots themselves. These are funded locally mostly, but it provides support to these pilots for a number of activities. The objectives of the project are, first of all, to validate the functional and safe performance of automated shuttle solutions in operational environments. So we target at TRL levels 7 to 9, and it depends a bit case by case where we are. Another objective is to evaluate the socio-economic and environmental impacts as well as user acceptance. User acceptance is an important element here as different target groups are addressed in the various pilots. So we have a nice diverse set of users. Thirdly, to validate the potential reduction of transport emissions and congestion. It's also a quantitative impact. And the last two objectives relate to outputs of the project. The fourth objective is to develop a scalable model for automated shuttle solutions. So how can this model be replicated in other cities? And how can it be scaled? In particular, when integrated with other public transportation. And the fifth is to develop a guideline for stakeholder and citizen engagement for policy planning, mobility planning for CCAM solutions, including business models. So the consortium consists of a group of horizontal partners. The project is coordinated by Ruprecht Consult. Web traffic management is one of the partners, as is POLIS. And they are complemented by Lux Mobility, RTCO, Future Mobility Network, UITP, and the European Passenger Federation. And the companies on the right is a list of pilot partners. They are related to the 10 pilots that I will show in a minute. And Christian in the panel here represents Pendle Mobility. So the 10 pilots are nicely spread across Europe. As you can see, there is one in Finland, one in Estonia, one in the north of the UK, one in Belgium, 2 in Luxembourg, another in Italy, Greece, Spain, and Portugal. And all of them demonstrate the integration of shuttles as a means for public transportation, mostly as last mile solutions. We also try to look at how they interface with other modes, so that you can truly speak of integration. As I mentioned, it's a diverse set of pilots in terms of the user groups that they represent, but also the type of locations where they are, the sizes of the fleet that are used, the geographical locations. We have some key information of these pilots. Like I mentioned, 10 in total. You see some illustrations here at the bottom, and these come from Barcelona and from, I shouldn't mix these up. Well, I'll tell you later. As you can see here in the row that summarizes the areas where the shuttles are deployed, you see that some address tourist destinations, others at an airport, an hospital, a port, an educational campus. So it is, like I said, very, very diverse. The second group of 5, you see that again, tourist destinations, but also key neighborhoods, which for some reason lack urban transportation, public transportation in that area, and therefore it's considered that these solutions can truly make a difference. Project outputs, there are 5 main deliverables. The first deliverable provides a review of mobility as a service projects. So project that addressed mass, looked into government and cooperation models, on data availability and sharing, and all of these other lessons that are important. I have a few separate slides on this deliverable in a moment, so I'll go to the next. Deliverable 2 provides educational campaign guidelines. This is a document that will help pilots as well as future cities that want to deploy autonomous transportation to engage with their user groups, their intended user groups. So how can you reach them? What information do you provide them? How can you raise awareness? How can you possibly educate them to use the system in the right way? Deliverable 3 is a set of flyers, summaries of the pilots, what the pilots are about and what their main results are. Deliverable 4 provides this scalable model toolbox. So it's a step-by-step guidance on the implementation of automated shuttle solutions. And this will be largely based on the lessons learned that we take from the 10 pilot cities, as well as follower cities that we reach out to. And this lessons learned guide itself is the 5th deliverable, where we try to collect everything we take from these pilots. I'm running out of time, I see.
You have 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes, yeah.
Okay, and I have 2 slides. On the mass stock taking report, what we did here is we identified key literature on mobility as a service, try to summarize that in a consistent manner. We tried to do the same with EU projects that dealt with this topic. So that provides a nice comprehensive overview of what the state of the art of mobility as a service is today. And thirdly, we did an assessment of the mass readiness of the Ride2Autonomy pilots. So we provided them a survey which allows us to benchmark pilot size using Civitas mass readiness indicators. And what we can do with these mass readiness level indicators is to make these charts that are now on the screen. So for each pilot city, we can quantify how advanced they are in a number of areas here, like integration of the platform, visibility of the pilot, use of shared mobility, and so on. There are 10 of these in the report, and well, I welcome everyone, of course, to download the report when it is available and to take notice of these findings. So that concludes this brief and quick overview. And I think we now go to one of the pilots, right, Laura?
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jaap. I just remind everyone that since we are going to have 2 presentations now in a row coming from the same project, but please post your questions in the chat if you already have them for Jaap. And now we welcome to the floor Christian Riester from Bax & Company. Christian works in areas of smart mobility and digitalization of transport to help cities, public authorities, and the private sector prepare for the future of urban transportation. And Christian is also a co-founder of Pendle Mobility, which he's representing here today, which is a startup focusing on integrated automated vehicles into public transport. So I let you the floor, Christian. Just as with the others, I will give you a 2-minute warning.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Laura. Great to be here today. And I'm going to share my screen now so everyone can see what I'm going to talk about. Does it work?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, as Laura said, my name is Christian. I'm one of the co-founders of Pendle Mobility. And within the Ride2Autonomy project, we are responsible for the development of the pilot here at the port of Barcelona in Spain. I'm originally from Germany, but right now in Barcelona. So that comes in very handy in developing this pilot in particular. Maybe beforehand, I would like to showcase a little bit what we are doing here at Pendle Mobility. We're basically a provider of on-demand automated mobility solutions with the idea to complement public transport. And we do basically everything from the pilot preparation, setup and vehicle deployment, and finally also the operation of the pilot itself. With that, we also work a lot with very reliable tech partners all over Europe. And indeed, what are we doing in the Port of Barcelona? Well, the objective, of course, is to test the integration of an automated shuttle here at the port, to test a new, safer, and also more controllable form of transport, mainly for employees and workers of the Port of Barcelona. And the idea here is really to see it as a first stepping stone in a larger strategy outlook that we will have a look later on. Basically to first test the technology and see how regulation and administration plays out to be, and really hopefully have it as a success case that allows the port to think about future much larger scale deployments of automated technology, not just for public transport, but also for logistic purposes, as you can imagine. The route that we have identified at the port is basically a smaller one. We'll have a look at it in the next slide. Idea is to connect a external parking lot with the office building where the Port Authority works in. That is the Barcelona World Trade Center. And just to drop a few characteristics of the pilot itself, the route is actually going to be operating on roads that are fully owned by the Port of Barcelona. All relevant stakeholders like the port police, the office buildings management, the local public transport operator, and the city council have been informed. But since the route is on private land, it was actually much easier to get all the regulations and permits in place, which really facilitated the process overall. Just a little insight already now. This is basically a snapshot from Google Earth, where we have a bird's eye view on the pilot route. On the right-hand side, this little artificial peninsula is basically where the Port Authority and the World Trade Center is located on the lower right. That's also where our pilot will start. And we basically go all the way down to the lower left, where we have the external parking lot. And overall, it's a 1.5 kilometer round trip route. We will be using one AV shuttle from EasyMile. And the idea is to have some sort of a small scale pilot. As I said, the idea is really to just test the technology, how it operates here locally, and what the administrative steps are to go through. And it will be open for all employees of the Port of Barcelona. It won't be very interesting for tourists, for example, anyway, because this route is mostly frequented by the port staff anyway. This is another snapshot from the route itself. You can see it's actually quite picturesque. Unfortunately, the day I took the picture, it was actually raining here. Otherwise, it's a very picturesque location. You can see here one of the one-way streets leading towards the World Trade Center. This will be also part of the route that we'll be taking with our vehicle that you can see here. As I said, we will be using the well-known EZ10 AV shuttle from EasyMile that we will customize with our own library, put logos of the project and all the various stakeholders on board. We will also be launching a launch event right before the pilot to generate some public visibility and also local attention, basically. And maybe the big question would be, how does all of this and this pilot basically fit within the transport strategy, not just of the port, but also that of the city of Barcelona? So in the next slides, I want to shine some light on that. Starting with the port, they actually just launched a new strategic plan, I think this August, or it's quite recent. And what they do there, basically, they focus on two things, quite detailed actions targeted for strategic outlook, the short term until 2025, but they also directly link it with a much more broader, longer term outlook all the way up to 2040. Some of the new strategic objectives of this plan are mostly spun around something that they define as being environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable. So those are the three main themes of the entire plan. Most importantly for our project is that they want to foster autonomous transport within the port area, not just looking at people movement, but also at logistics, as I said earlier. And what they also would like to basically improve is the integration between the port and city. So as I said, this pilot is really seen as a first stepping stone. If successful, it will allow, let's say, the development and the ideation, conceptualization of much larger scale use cases that have already been spoken about. One of it could be, for example, improving the passenger flow between a cruise ship terminal and the access to the city's public transport. You can imagine that this is quite a, let's say, challenge for public transport, since it's very an irregular transport problem to solve. Basically, a few times a week, a huge ship lands, and then 5,000 people are like spilled into the into this particular bridge that you can see. And one idea would be to deploy a self-driving, demand-regulated, automated system that brings all the passengers not just to the nearest taxi stop location, but actually to the nearest metro station. So that is something that could be very interesting, and the port is looking at that intensively. One other thing that the port is also looking at is to provide safer and sustainable on-site transport for workers. So you can imagine it's a very, let's say, work-intensive working location. Lots of accidents can occur. Sometimes it's restricted, so only certain people with security clearance can enter some sections of the port, and this could also be a very interesting use case for automated mobility in general. But what about the city of Barcelona? How do they look at automated mobility? Well, actually, the local public transport provider, TMB, has also just launched their new strategic plan, in that they basically proclaim that they want to reach 65% of all journeys taken in the city are to be basically done via public transport, or 65% of those trips should be done via public transport by 2025. That is actually 10% more what has been the case in 2019. And two other things that the city really is pushing for is the deployment of new mobility services, like shared vehicles, bikes, and also, most importantly, improving the efficiency and the reach of the public transport network by pushing first and last mile solutions, which is a nice use case for automated vehicles as well, just to increase a bit the accessibility of the public transport network. That's a bit from my side. Here you can see our team here in Barcelona. It's Gil, Sami, and myself, and I'm looking forward to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you so much for being so time efficient. I was going to give you a warning, but then I realized that you were at the end and it wasn't necessary anymore. So I would like also to welcome back Jab to the floor. There is already one question for you, just a very simple question asking if for Christian, asking if the pilot is going to have a safety driver. But you can ask this very quickly, but what I would like to ask also is, you talk about possible use cases. So my question is, what is needed for this pilot to scale up? Is just a question of the technology that it's not there, it's more the regulations in Barcelona and Spain? Yeah, just a more general question, but please don't forget about the safety driver also to know.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, quick answer is yes, we will have safety operators. It will most likely be one of the three people you see on the screen right now driving the bus. So one of us will be the safety operator. And then your second question was about what is needed to do some upscaling of this pilot. Indeed, I mean, the whole reason is why we have such a short scale pilot is really to allow the people at the Port Authority to get some hands-on experiences of such a pilot, even though, of course, there have been hundreds of pilots in Europe already. It's important for I think the local stakeholders to get some hands-on practical feeling of what it means to deploy such a service. And in parallel, also to have some sort of a longer-term strategy roadmap in place that basically already pre-identifies a number of use cases, such as the ones I just presented, and not have this pilot just for the sake of having a pilot, but really to see it as, a first stepping stone towards a larger goal, really with some steps like first to identify these future use cases, then test technology and regulations that are very specific to each individual location anyway. And then you can think about having maybe a small scale but longer term pilot project that doesn't look at a few weeks, but maybe 1 or 2 years of deployment. And once this has been reached, then an organization can think about deploying it maybe commercially once it's also technologically and administratively allowed in the Smugnov location.
Thank you, Christian. I think it's very good to see one pilot that is really trying to focus in the strategy in the longer term, in the future use cases, than just one pilot to try the technology and that's it. There's also a question for JAP about the procurement procedures in the project. So they're asking, Dario is asking if you could give more details about the public tenders that will be launched to choose the vehicles for the pilots, or I don't know if the vehicles have already been chosen, but if you can give more information on these.
Thank you for that question. I also saw the question. I don't know the precise answer, probably. What I do know is that all of these pilots select the vehicles themselves, so they have their own selection processes, and some of them indeed have public procurement processes in place, either close to completion or to be launched in the coming months. So it depends case by case. But yeah, there is definitely public tenders foreseen.
Okay, I think he has a follow-up question, which is who will be the owners of the shuttles for the various pilots? I mean, this will maybe also, Christian, you can answer it for Barcelona if you know the answer.
Yeah, so the vehicle is not owned by the port nor the city. We will actually facilitate the vehicle for them. So we're working with EasyMile basically to get a vehicle ourselves and then deploy it at the port of Barcelona. And then we also we take it back. So
there is also an interesting question about data. So, but for the pilot from Frederick, who is owning the data in Barcelona? Is it going to be Pendle Mobility, or is it going to be shared with the city administration, or is it going to be owned by the port?
Yeah, good question. We're still in discussions about that. Most likely we will share it for sure with the involved stakeholders. If it's going to be open or private, that's up for them basically to decide, but there has not been a final decision on that yet.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions at the moment, but it's good enough because we also have to go to the next speaker. I still encourage anyone to post questions in the chat, and I encourage Jab and Christian to stay online to answer any possible questions that can come their way. Thank you very much to both of you. And the next speaker that I see that he's already here, Max, we go from one pilot in Barcelona to way north in Sweden to another pilot in Varberg. Max here is a strategist for mobility and transport infrastructure in the municipality of Varberg. He's responsible for the long-term planning of infrastructure and sustainable mobility. And this, of course, includes the planning and testing of new modes and new services for public transport. So Max, whenever you want, we were seeing your, yes, now we're seeing it again.
You see my presentation now, good?
Yes.
Yes, we're on the other end of Barcelona, you could say. We're a rather small city, in the west coast of Sweden, about 40 minutes by train south of Gothenburg, where the POLIS conference is due next week. So we're quite close to Gothenburg, but we're pretty rural, a major summer destination. And we, as a part of the PAVE or the PAV project, planning for autonomous vehicles, we did a small pilot in Varberg this summer. The PAV project, just in short, the object is to run regional pilots and then to formulate strategies for how to incorporate autonomous vehicles, especially in public transport, in the urban planning and the traffic planning and the spatial planning of a city. And in order to do that, we did a short test in Varberg this summer, and Varberg is located here, as you can see. I could say that the partners doing pilots is Hightrans, and then they are active in other projects presented today. The region Hanover, Almere, just outside of Amsterdam, and Varberg in Sweden. Varberg is by far the smallest city participating in this project. We did a short pilot demonstrator, only 2 weeks in June. We did it in a stretcher road right next to one of our major summer destinations, the Appelviken Bay, which is a major surf destination, windsurfing and wave surfing. A major goal was, as for in Barcelona, to actually get the Varbergers and visitors a first-hand experience of what is an AV. A major goal just to know what is it like to ride in an AV, and what is it like to see an AV in the traffic environment. That was one of our main goals. It shows a test line along the stretch was short enough to provide a reasonable frequency in traffic with only one vehicle. It's about 1 kilometer. That meant that we could run the one bus in a 30-minute traffic, and that was pretty good. In the northern end of this stretch here, we have a camping area where we could charge the bus if we put up a tent. We had a good cooperation with the camping site. And also here you could change over to a small non-autonomous but electric tourist train that runs into central Varberg, which is located about 4 kilometers north of this location. One of the assumptions was that we were to limit cars. We were to close off this stretcher road for cars, and we were to limit parking along this stretcher road. We also used, cheated a bit. We didn't have a public procurement. We used Nobina, which is Varberg's public transport deliverance or operator. They actually run AVs regularly outside of Stockholm. So we simply borrowed one of their vehicles, transported it to Varberg, and redecorated it in our colors. We had 2 weeks of a lot of challenges, more than we actually thought from the outset. COVID-19, of course, was a limit. We couldn't get all the passengers that we wanted on board the vehicle. The vehicle is designed for 9 people. We could have at most 4 due to COVID restrictions. The system turned out to be very sensitive. We knew that in advance, but we didn't know exactly how sensitive it was. And we also didn't know that our little chosen stretcher road would provide a really tough environment for this type of vehicle. We had flying sand and moving weed and bushes we had heard about, that this could disturb the system. Flying sand was new to both Nobina and Easy Mile, as it turned out. The flying sand was put up by the leaders, and we had a lot of emergency brakes. So that we had a lot of parked cars. We had a ban, but at first this was a new ban, and at first this was ignored by the general public. But after the police did some work with billing some cars, we had the parked cars disappeared. It was really good. But we had a really challenging traffic environment with pedestrians, cyclists, There were cars driving because we didn't get the seal up, the close off of the road. We had caravans, motorhomes, trucks, and also an ongoing reconstruction of the areas that was supposed to be finished but wasn't. So we had excavators and tractors in this, and this resulted in 550 emergency brakes, according to statistics from Nabina. And we actually had a major breakdown, especially the last day. We had to tow the vehicle away, actually. And this is the picture here. You see yours truly trying to actually shake the bus to get it operational again, because this was what we heard from our technical support, which we had in our mobile phones as we did this. This picture was, by the way, very much published locally in newspapers, etc. But given that we had problems, we had also a lot of upsides. We had a very positive cooperation with Nabina, which are a very experienced service provider in this type of vehicles. They helped us with the permits, they helped us with the vehicle which they own, they helped us with technical support. And we also had a good cooperation with our public transport company, which is regional, Hallandstrafiken. The city doesn't have its own public transport. We had a very positive media coverage. The general public response was very positive. We had 800 trips made in 2 weeks in spite of COVID limitations and in spite of not being able to run fully 30-minute runs. We had 2 trips per hour from, I say, 10 in the morning, and then a reload break from 12 to 13, and then from 13 to 16 we had traffic. But I think now most of the people in Varberg and the visitors know what an autonomous vehicle is and how it is to ride. And one of the quotations that we especially liked was that it was a brave move from the municipality, and there was a lot of questions about when do these type of vehicles actually got to operate regularly in Varberg, which we thought was very positive, that people wanted these type of vehicles and didn't just see it as a gimmick. Lessons learned. This is a very immature technology, and we had a lot of problems. We also used not the latest generation of easy mile bus, I should say. In the ones that I saw that we're going to be used in Barcelona, there are more technology involving, for instance, cameras to identify what kind of objects. This wasn't present on our bus, which provided the problem. But anyway, the vehicles are very slow. If we are to use this in regular traffic, we need higher speeds. We need better interactions with the surrounding environment. We can't have flying sand stopping the bus. We can't have moving bushes stopping the bus. It also
2 minutes max.
2 minutes, okay. But there's also a necessary to adapt the traffic environment to the AVs. We can't use this kind of very demanding traffic environment. But all things given, there's great opportunities for this kind of vehicle in a less demanding traffic environment. Short, what we see for lessons learned for public transport. Yes, we think this could be a transport solution in future Varberg. There's need for a number of vehicles to have a more dense traffic, high traffic. We need a support infrastructure close to the area where the AVs are operated, because they tend to break down and then you have to fix them. Of course, in the future, you have to have true autonomy. Right now, we had an operator riding the vehicle, but in the future, we need to have true autonomy, actually the vehicle running without an operator. Higher speeds, as I said, especially if you use them in the countryside. And we had a linear service from A to B, but is that the best way to use an AV? Maybe it's an area coverage solution. Just in short, still we see possible applications for AVs in public transport in Varberg in the future. We have new city developments in the harbor area where we could use it, and that's a less demanding traffic environment. We have the rail line that connects the beach that we tried it out on with the city, that rail line is closed down, and we are thinking about could we use that stretcher road, especially for AVs. Outskirt areas of the central Varberg, and of course the new development up here in Värö, where we are actually from the ground building 3,000 housing units. So we create the road system, and maybe we could put in AVs from the start in this planning. And also last mile applications in the countryside. In the countryside, there are some challenges given the who owns the roads, etc. But we think that the countryside could be a possible application. So, but this, given that we have to solve some technical problems, this could be viable in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas. Thank you very much for your presentation, and as Susanne says, for the very honest account of the pilot. There's already two questions. Well, first, one very general, asking if the parking ban that was imposed in the road, it was maintained after the pilot ended. Was this the case?
Yes, it was, and it was very, very appreciated once we got it in place. There was a lot of debate before, but once we got it in place, it was really appreciated that we didn't have parked on these stretcher roads all summer.
Okay, no, not really. That's always the case, no? That once the cars are gone, everyone appreciates it so much. And then there's another question that I also wanted to ask myself: what advice would you give to other municipalities of a similar size? Because you mentioned especially that you're a small city that would also like to expose their citizens to AVs, to autonomous vehicles.
I think choose a less complicated destination than the we chose for doing this. I think we put it as a test. This was really great, but if you are to show it to the general public as a transport alternative when it breaks down all the time, or do emergency brakes all the time, that wasn't that great. But I think choose a more sealed off stretcher. I think the Barcelona case is a good example of how you can do it when you don't have to interact with every possible vehicle.
Definitely, if you have if you're going to choose a testing facility, one that ensures you a little bit more of success. So don't complicate your life extra.
No.
And there is another question from Patrick from Helmond asking, what kind of roadside systems do you consider to provide support to shuttles in the future?
Sorry?
I don't know if I also understand, what kind of roadside systems do you consider to provide support to shuttles in the future? I mean, I don't know, maybe you mentioned also that you needed infrastructure support. What did you mean by that? I also wanted to ask, like, is it digital infrastructure, or is it more like, as Patrick has, more systems, more facilities, let's say, in the...
I think given experiences from this pilot and other pilots, we need to enable the vehicle to find some kind of navigation. So if you go out in the countryside, for instance, there are needs to put up some kind of navigational aid along the route that the AV has to take. As for the environment that we tried it out, we should have foreseen maybe flying sand, maybe removing some of the weeds and bushes that was disturbing, because we had heard about this from other test sites that this was a disturbance. The flying sand was new to most of the people involved, including EasyMile. And it was kind of interesting because we thought it was sand from the beach, but it was actually from the quite new stone paving that is out there. So that it's more of a general lesson that if you are to run this vehicle on paved stone, you should know that the sand between the stones can disturb such a system.
Thank you, Max. As I said, for your answers, for your presentation, for bringing your experience here. I would encourage you to stay here if you want to continue the conversation in the chat and answer any other questions that could come up. And I would like to welcome now to the floor our last speaker, Daniel Franco from Ruprecht Consult. Perfect, he's here. Hi, Daniel. So Daniel is a mobility consultant at Rupert Consult. He is a civil engineer and he works supporting cities and regions in integrating innovative solutions into their sustainable urban mobility visions and strategies. Particularly, he's very focused on CCAM. He is going to present today from a presentation we are going back from pilot to strategy, but now we go back from the national perspective to the more local one. And I let Daniel present. As before, I will warn you with 2 minutes so we can still have some more minutes for questions at the end.
Sure. Thank you, Laura, and thank you for the opportunity. And hello, everyone. Thank you for the fellow panelists for the very interesting presentations as well. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, but no. Yes, I'm Daniel Franco from Rupert Consult. And today, as mentioned by Laura, I want to share with you a bit of the work done in the Dynaxibility for CE project on the strategies for CCAM planning and implementation. So first, very shortly about the project. It is responding to an Interreg Central Europe experimental call that is trying to find how to maximize impact through intelligent research and innovation, matchmaking, and cooperation between different funding streams and research outputs. So this is a capitalization project that it's combining outputs from various previous and ongoing projects. And focusing on how to make this, work in the practice in functional urban areas. We're working with 7 functional urban areas across different countries and partners across the Central Europe area as well. The project is going until spring next year. Now finalizing an approval of an extension until end of May. And these are just a few of the projects that are involved. So different initiatives and ongoing and previous projects that are considered and contributing their results to Dynaxibility for CE, represented also in our project consortium. And just shortly on the project's objectives. The main objectives are to develop and contextualize SUMP guidance documents, so topic guides or annexes for planning innovative mobility strategies. And this is particularly for CCAM, UVAR, and MAS solutions. And through this also to strengthen the capacities of authorities and stakeholders to plan and develop new mobility services in functional urban areas. And with this, we're also providing tools and trainings tailored for these cities and regions' needs. And a third objective is to support the exploitation and take-up of the project outputs and of SUMP in general through the program area, working with SUMP national task forces, and enhancing the existing SUMP Competence Center for Central Europe, which I would recommend everyone to keep an eye on, because we will be publishing our outputs there. So just a couple of things to look forward to in 2022, particularly about CCAM planning. We're currently working on an SUMP topic guide on CCAM, and as well a couple of tools. These are CCAM readiness self-assessment tool, and a guideline for MAS and CAD CCAM ready transport models. This together with the other projects such as the PAVE project and others, which are also contributing to the document. So that means also the upcoming trainings. I would encourage everyone to check our social media, and of course, through the POLIS channels, it would also be promoted. But there's trainings coming up next year, not only on CCAM planning, but also on UVAR and MAS and the different tools that the project is developing. So yeah, keep an eye on that. So particularly around the CCAM tools, these are building on some previous work that we've done, mainly the automation ready framework, which we developed within the Coexist project in 2020. And this was meant to support cities and stakeholders through structuring their CCAM planning process and addressing the different mobility aspects, as you can see here in the framework graph, and for the specific stages of action that the city might be in at a certain point. So now our CCAM readiness self-assessment tool will be combining the approach of the SUMP self-assessment tool with the specific topics such as are listed here in the automation ready framework for CCAM planning. So it's meant to be a easy, let's say, initial step for cities to find good solutions and find good references and methods and material and resources to start their planning of CCAM services or take it up whatever the stage they are in. Another key resource on our work is the SUMP practitioner briefing for road vehicle automation, which was also developed within the Coexist project in 2019. And of course, I mean, the SUP concept and methodology lies at the center of our efforts in Dynaxibility to guide innovative planning, innovative mobility planning. So part of the effort is to take this initial document and take this guidance and analyze, okay, what are now the current needs, what are the key gaps and challenges that are remaining, and how can we enhance them, tailor-make new guidance and tools to, as here defined in the concept of automation readiness, to increase the capability of authorities and stakeholders to make structured and informed decisions about CCAM implementation. With this in mind, we had a workshop early this year in April. This was together also with some of the projects here today, such as PAVE, but also the Art Forum project. The goal of this workshop was to review the existing guidance on CCAM planning, and get feedback from local authorities and stakeholders. And some of the results that we can highlight specifically of interest today are on some of the key identified needs of support to enable proactive decision making from authorities are summarized in this graph. And we can highlight a few that I think are of interest today, maybe not to take too long, but particularly around the identification of implementation scenarios and service models, including how to achieve the effective integration with public transport, avoiding unsustainable competition, and also the prevalence of car dependency. So this is something that it's been addressed in today's webinar a lot. Also, there was a lot of discussion about how to ensure the alignment with local policy goals and really effectively understanding and responding to societal needs in the solution designs. We can also see that there's a need for clear connection between physical and digital infrastructure requirements. So what are the functional and operational requirements for each of the considered service models? There's also, of course, the need to have a functional urban area approach to such solutions. So how to not only plan for urban centers and for that context, but also to consider solutions for rural, sub and peri-urban areas. And a few others that I want to highlight is, for instance, the need for tools and guidance to conduct robust impact assessment that not only include the mobility aspects of the implementation scenarios, but also the socioeconomic and environmental impacts, among others, and the importance of achieving integrated innovation, an integrated innovative mobility concept. So to exploit the synergies with other solutions such as MaaS, on-demand and sharing solutions, for instance, the capacities of CITS, for example, on traffic management optimization. So with this in mind, and with this key challenge of identifying those key implementation scenarios and service models, I want to go forward with that area of the discussion and how to plan for CCAM. And starting with already knowledge that we do have a rather clear clear results on the preferred CCAM service scenarios, at least in Europe. We have used this image here to make a poll, sometimes with the audience in some of the workshops, with usually the same results, which I would hope are also the case here. And I'm sure you're able to predict what the image selected would be for let's say the ideal autonomous vehicle future. It is usually yes, the image of the shuttle bus, and this was also the result of the Eurobarometer survey, which was conducted with circa 30,000 responses across Europe, and 71% of the respondents did say that this picture of a public transport shuttle corresponds to their idea of automated vehicles. This was also the result of previous consultations. For example, the citizens dialogues conducted within the Mission Publiques initiative. Here are the results of the consultation in Austria and Aachen. And it also showed a clear preference for public transport-based modes and ride-sharing solutions, of course, without forgetting to improve the current systems for active and sustainable modes. But it does show an understanding of the space and energy issue that is shown by this very popular image on the right, and to have public transport at the center of these solutions. And so with this also in mind, in Dynaxibility for CE, our partners have done very interesting work in the evaluation of scenarios towards low carbon innovative services. And two of them are addressing CCAM solutions, particularly the Stuttgart region and the city of Leipzig. So I want to shortly just present a few of the results that they've had this year on their efforts. So the Stuttgart region, following the work done by the University of Stuttgart in Coexist, developing automation-ready modeling functionalities, they have conducted a study on the integration of autonomous on-demand ride-sharing vehicles on the public transport system, and this for a specific area in the region. And they've tested a few scenarios listed here shortly. So it included the replacement of regular bus lines by on-demand ride-sharing offer, considering both pickup only at bus stations, or also at the user's preferred place, say at their choice, so flexibly. And the third scenario, the combination of selected bus lines with this autonomous on-demand offer. And without going too much into detail on the specifics of the simulation, just on the results that they have found, and quite interestingly, we can see that an improvement was evidenced on the mobility offer in the area, with positive effects on the modal split. We can see that there's a reduction in the private vehicle trips and kilometers traveled, and an increase in that of public transport. Although in total, there was no real reduction of the total driven distance. But you can see that also the results per scenario are quite similar. It's not the case for CO2 emissions, where no reduction was really found, mainly due to the upstream energy generation transport related emissions for electric vehicles.
1 minute to wrap up, Daniel.
Sure. Real quickly, but after consideration of the cost and number of vehicles needed, the third scenario seems to be the most interesting one that offers the biggest potentials. That's the one integrated public transport with CCAM sharing solutions. And shortly also in Leipzig, where there are several initiatives coming together to plan integration among innovative mobility services, including CCAM. Our lead partner here, Leipzig Verkehrsbetrieb, is taking forward its demand responsive transport project, Flexa, testing on-demand services under integration with public transport. And this is a key step to identify CCAM implementation scenarios. So they have tested a couple of those pilots for on-demand services, not automated yet, but there's quite interesting results. We can see that the users are quite open to replacing their car trips with such on-demand services and using their cars less often. Now a new pilot has been launched this year, and looking to the future, what is coming for Leipzig. I mean, these pilots aimed to develop and optimize that service offer on-demand services, this DRT solution as a potential for CCAM in the future. And indeed, there's a very interesting concept of involving public transport in this planning. So new bus lines are being now integrated, planned in an integrated manner with these Flexa pilots. And also coming up in 2022 is their Absolute project with a pilot of autonomous bus line integrated with public transport, and taking all of this into the CCAM planning within Dynaxibility with the scenario evaluation and an action plan coming up for CCAM implementation next year. That is all from my side. This is the partners in our project, and thank you so much for your attention. Sorry that I was a bit beyond the time there.
Not to worry, Daniel. Thank you very much. We still have a couple of minutes for questions. I don't see any in the chat, but please, if you have anything for Sana, just ask. I do have one question myself. You mentioned the self-assessment tool for readiness for cities, and I just want to know also, probably the cities here may also be interested if this tool is better to use as self-assessment for preparing for a pilot development, or are we looking into a much broader perspective for like the strategy or even the large scale that I see a lot of debate also in the chat? Which one is it?
So similar to the automation ready framework, the idea is that the tool will adjust to the stage the city is in. So if a city is just starting with CCAM planning efforts, the questionnaire should go into more the raising awareness, the public consultation, and the strategy development side. But there will be also elements of the questionnaire and of the self-assessment tool for cities that are more involved now in the measure planning or even the CCAM implementation stages. So there will be also guidance for pilot planning, for instance, or more specific service planning, like we were mentioning before. And important to mention, as maybe many of the audience members maybe are familiar with the SVMP self-assessment tool, that at the end of the questionnaire you get this very helpful set of references, good examples, and tools that you can go to depending on the result you get with the questionnaire. This will also be the case for our CCAM readiness self-assessment tool, so that it can be be tailored to the specific stage the city or the region is in.
Thank you. That was a very complete answer. We still have 1 more minute. I just wanted to, because you had this very big slide with all the challenges, which I think it's very good and it's useful to analyze it little by little. But just to close up, what do you think is the most pressing challenge when establishing that strategy, the planning? What do you think is the most pressing, as in the first even to tackle?
I mean, what we're talking about today regarding what are the actual success implementation scenarios or service models, what could actually work on CCAM, that is the still main question, and how to move the action towards that direction in a field where there's of course not yet good examples of such implementation. That's still something that requires enhanced impact assessment capacities, that requires more knowledge exchange among projects that are, for example, taking on more advanced pilots, and also involving these new functionalities for modeling in scenario evaluation, for instance, so that the authorities can take the informed decisions about, okay, what can we actually look towards for, and stop maybe having a lot of doubts of where to act, which I think are still the case.
Thank you. I think that was again another very complete answer, and at least it satisfies my curiosity. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you all. We are already at 3:30, 1 minute over time. Very happy with the time management of the session, and we have kept most of our attendees until now. So really thank you all to participate. This is our last week with Public Transport Lab webinars. For those that are POLIS members, tomorrow you will be able to enjoy our last webinar on how can technology support public transport. This is really only exclusive for POLIS members, but otherwise all the other Public Transport Lab webinars, those that have been public, are available from our website, and as will be the slides, this presentation, and the video coming from today. That's it from our side. So thank you, and I wish you a very nice afternoon.